The slap came before I even saw her hand. My glasses hit the ballroom floor and 130 guests froze. "Give me your keys," my new daughter-in-law screamed. "You don't need that condo anymore." That's when I realized this wasn't about family. It was about power. And before the night was over, everyone in that room would learn exactly whose house they were trying to steal. I am June Whitaker, 69, retired librarian, widow of a man who could coax a porch into standing straight and a creaky staircase into behaving like it still remembered Sunday shoes. The day my son married Brielle Klein, she slapped me because I refused to give her my keys, and something in me unlatched with a click I could almost hear. I bent to find my glasses, palms shaking, but not from fear. I'd been tired for months, tired of being edited out of my own life. When I stood, I heard my voice steady itself the way a judge steadies a room. "No," I said, tasting steel. "Not tonight. Not ever." A hush gathered like fog along the veranda. From the corner of my eye, I saw my son, Logan, staring at the cedar planks. He didn't look at me. That hurt. How it hurt. But I had come prepared. I didn't plan the slap. I did plan what happens when someone demands your keys. I stepped away from the string lights and dialed a number I hadn't used in a year. "Theo," I said when he answered. "It's time." People imagine stories like this begin with shouting. They don't. They begin with small edits. They begin with your sweater called cozy in a tone that means old. They begin with a smile that never warms. The word concern stretched like plastic wrap over the shape of control. "June, that sweater is cozy," Brielle said the first week we met. Later, my car was charming. My condo, too much for a woman your age. My garden, a liability because of the stairs. She said, "I'm just worried," and worried me into erasing myself in pencil marks you can't see until you hold the page up to the light. Logan used to call me Junebug. He used to sit on our porch steps, ankles crossed, knees dusty from helping his daddy replace a railing. Those knees grew into slacks and email chains. He started talking like meetings. "Mom, it's not safe to live alone." Brielle found a great active senior community. He never quite looked at me when he said it. The first time I saw the appraiser across the street, tape measure, clipboard, a stranger's eyes counting my windows, I watched from behind the drapes, the way a mouse watches a cat and prays to heaven it's a raccoon. 2 weeks later, I found a folder on my kitchen table labeled Options, crowded with brochures of cheerful lobbies and bus schedules. The corner of a yellow Post-it peeked out like a tongue. "Once we move June safely, we can stage her condo. B." My name, underlined like a problem to solve. I did what librarians do. I made notes. I kept records. I called the one person who knows both the 14th Amendment and how to drink church basement coffee without wincing. Theo Alvarez, attorney at law, the only man I trusted with the bones of my life after Frank died. "Don't escalate," Theo said. "Document. And June, start with bank alerts and a title lock. You'd be surprised how many times help looks like a handwritten quitclaim deed. I wasn't foolish. People see white hair and forget you were young once, and learn things the hard way. Frank and I decided long ago that visible wealth invites thieves, so we kept our money quiet and our porch loud. I worked part-time at the library even after retirement because books are better than television and people need to be seen. The kids from Burke High called me Miss June. I called their names like prayers. I filed paperwork the way some folks shell peas, a rhythm you carry in your bones. And I watched. The ambush came on a Thursday, 3 weeks before the wedding. Brielle texted, "Family dinner? 6 p.m., big news." I arrived with peach cobbler. I left with a hot core of fear. They had invited Brielle's parents and a financial planner with a gelled part. There was tea, a beige cheese board, and a script. "At your age," her mother said, slicing a cracker as if it were logic, "stairs are a hazard. And what if you need help and no one knows?" Brielle's father slid a folder my way. "The market is at a sweet point," he said. If you sell now, you'll fund the best years of your life and help Logan and Brielle build their foundation. I looked at my son. He watched the planner's hand with the pen. "Mom," he said gently, "we just want you safe." Safe is a good word until you notice the lock is on the outside. "I'm not moving," I said. Silence arrived like a cold front. Brielle tilted her head, not hurt, not confused, calculating. "We've already toured a place in Mount Pleasant," she said softly. "We put a refundable deposit to hold your suite." "Refundable?" I asked. "If we decide it's best," she said, and smiled with all her teeth. I went home and made a list. Dates, times, phrases. I printed bank statements and set up a camera facing my mailbox. I bought a new front door lock that logs every code entry. I taped the spare key to the inside of a book jacket I knew no one but me would ever pull from the shelf, Frank's dog-eared copy of The Woodwright's Shop. A week later, Brielle and Logan showed up with a man carrying a tripod. "Staging ideas," Brielle chirped, sweeping through my living room with a measuring tape and a comment about dated sofas. She opened my pantry. She opened my linen closet. She reached for the drawer where I keep my keys. My hand got there first. "You don't live here," I said. She laughed. "Not yet." The next day, a certified letter arrived. A petition, not filed yet but drafted, requesting that a court review whether I could safely manage daily affairs. My stomach clenched on 3 words: temporary guardianship requested. I drove to Theo's office with my hands at 10 and 2. I put the letter on his desk and watched his jaw. "I've seen this play," he said. "We're not acting in it. We're writing our own." He opened a new folder and labeled it Whittaker, The Last Key. You know, the rest of the tablecloth at the reception. Flowers, cake, a string quartet, sawing Mozart into afternoon sugar. Magnolia Veranda overlooks a river. The light there makes you feel like your better self is just behind you, tapping your shoulder. When Brielle slapped me, a gasp ran through the guests like wind through tall grass. I caught my breath and reached for my phone. Theo answered on the first ring. "Need me to walk?" he said. "Better," I said. "Run." He made it before the next toast. I didn't march in right away. I stood under a magnolia and watched a dragonfly stitch the air. You can get very small under a live oak with a trunk older than the church. You can remember you belong to something that doesn't care whether your dress came from Belk or a boutique, or whether your daughter-in-law thinks your sofa is dated. When we walked in together, Theo in a navy suit that meant business without raising its voice, the quartet fell silent mid-measure. The best man's champagne flute hung in air like a question. "Ladies and gentlemen," Theo said, projecting like a man who has argued in front of people who wear robes and frown for a living. "I apologize for the interruption. We need Logan Whittaker and Brielle Klein up front." Brielle's lips parted. Logan's face lost its summer. "First," Theo continued, "this is formal notice that all authorization, co-signs, guarantor arrangements, auto transfers, previously extended by Mrs. Whittaker regarding Mr. Whittaker's personal accounts are now revoked." A whisper surfed the room. Brielle's eyes darted. Fish in a net. "Second, notice is served that any attempt to list, appraise, stage, or otherwise enter Mrs. Whittaker's residence without written permission will be treated as trespass and elder exploitation. Cameras and entry logs are active." A fork clinked the floor again. "Third," Theo said, lifting the last document, "a cease and desist is in effect regarding any representation of Mrs. Whittaker's mental status to vendors, neighbors, or institutions. False statements are actionable. So are threats." Brielle smiled in that dry way people smile when they think the room is with them. "She's a librarian with a dusty condo," she said. "This is dramatic." Theo folded his papers with the patience of granite. "And you are on notice." The venue manager approached, face pale. I just received a reversal on the card that paid the balance," he stammered, eyes darting toward Brielle. "Is there another form of payment?" A card had been used with my name on it. The signature wasn't mine. The merchant had a copy of my police report from when I notified my bank. The reversal wasn't revenge. It was maintenance, like retrofitting an old porch before it collapses. People began to murmur. Soft, uncomfortable pockets of sound. I could feel a tide turning, not toward me exactly, but toward something that looked like gravity. "June," Logan whispered finally. "Please." "Please what?" I asked. "Please say yes when I mean no." He flinched. For a moment, the briefest, I saw Junebug. Then he was gone, and there was only a grown man who wanted the easy fix. I didn't preach. I turned to Theo and nodded. "Let's go," I said. "There's more than one kind of ceremony." By morning, I had 37 missed calls. The first 4 were angry. The next 11 were desperate. The last 22 were quiet. Call, hang up, as if Logan were dialing a lighthouse. My neighbor, Miss Opal, sent a video, a clear shot of the slap, the words, "Hand me your keys." Another neighbor forwarded a photo of the appraiser in my yard, date stamped, his tape measure shining like a thin blade. A young man from across the hall, who likes to skateboard at noon and sleep at midnight, brought over a screenshot of a social media post where Betrayal posted a picture of my street with the caption, "Location Scouting." I sat at my kitchen table, the one Frank sanded until July perched on it like a bird, and built a timeline. Theo added affidavits. We collected prints of texts that said things like, "Once June is settled, we can flip the place fast," and a note in Betrayal's phone about my spare key in the laundry drawer, moved months ago. The draft petition arrived again, filed this time, with 3 witness statements from guests who said I had caused a scene. None included the slap. Shame did not arrive. Fury arrived. Not a bonfire, a coal. You can heat a house for a long winter with the right coal. Theo filed a motion to dismiss paired with a request for a protective order. He does this for a living. I do indexing. Together, we made a file that would make a judge's clerk give a small private nod. I called Adult Protective Services, not to report myself a victim, but to ask for resources for others. I emailed the director of the downtown library and asked for a room. The next Saturday, I printed a sign on heavy cardstock, "Keys and Boundaries, a porch conversation for seniors." It sounded gentler than it felt. 5 people came, then 9, then 26. I listened. I told them what Theo told me. I watched their shoulders drop when they learned no is a complete sentence. One woman cried when she realized her son had co-signed her life twice without asking. We began to say a sentence out loud like a liturgy. Kindness is not incompetence. The hearing came 6 weeks later in a courtroom where the air vents hum and microphones are just tricky enough to make you wonder whether your voice will make it to the judge. Betrayal walked in, wearing white again. I wondered if she understood irony. Their attorney started with words like concern, safety, best interest. He gestured at my age. He gestured at the stairs up to my condo. He gestured at the word alone. Theo stood like a lighthouse. "Let's test concern with facts," he said, and placed Exhibit A on the screen, the video of the slap. Gasps. Exhibit B, time-stamped images of the appraiser. Exhibit C, texts about flipping the place fast. Exhibit D, the credit card reversal case number and my bank's fraud determination. Exhibit E, the door lock log showing an attempted code entry at 2:14 a.m., 2 nights after the wedding. The judge's pen slowed. Judges are not impressed by speeches. They are impressed by receipts. Betrayal's attorney pivoted. "Financial mismanagement," he tried. "Mrs. Whitaker gives away money." Theo didn't blink. "Here is Mrs. Whitaker's budget. Here is her investment account. Conservative, laddered, no wild swings. Here is her revocable trust that's been in place for a decade, naming backups and specifying healthcare directives. Here are her donations, documented, scheduled, not impulsive." This was one of the things I had not told anyone. Frank and I lived small so we could give loud, quietly. I didn't need the world to know. I needed the girl at the library who shelters in the stacks to have a coat. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Whitaker, why did you not tell your family about your finances?" he asked. "Because wealth, real or imagined, warps people," I said. "And because privacy takes care of a lot of things greed can't find." He made a sound that might have been a chuckle in a different man. Our gavel moments came like beads on a string. The clip where Betrayal says, "I can get the keys from her laundry drawer." The late-night lock attempt matched to her phone location. The fact that Logan had spoken with a law firm about guardianship weeks before the concern dinners. When the judge ruled, he didn't raise his voice. He said words like, "dismissed" and "protective order" the way you say Tuesday and "please pass the salt." He did look at me when he said, "Mrs. Whitaker, I suspect your porch is sturdier than most." Outside, the sky was the color of a fresh legal pad. Theo squeezed my shoulder. "That was one," he said. "There will be more." Wars are rarely a single case. They are habits you unlearn and boundaries you maintain. Word got around, not because I wanted it to, because truth rolls downhill and picks up people on the way. A local podcast asked for an interview. Then the paper. I said no to television. I didn't want to be edited into a meme. I said yes to a library town hall, then 2 churches, then finally, City Hall. We titled the forum Grandma's Gavel because a councilwoman with gray braids and a wicked laugh insisted. "You got the moral gavel, Miss June," she said. "Bang it." We didn't bang. We built. A monthly clinic with volunteer attorneys, a checklist of before-the-crisis tasks, title watch, beneficiary updates, powers of attorney with real conversations attached, not just signatures, a door lock, how-to class, a script bank for hard sentences. We printed "Kindness is not incompetence" on a bookmark and gave out 10,000 in 6 months. Miss Opal brought muffins and the stubborn belief that every scam email should be answered by a grandmother with a whistle. Betrayal and Logan moved to a 1-bedroom outside town. He took a new job. She started a brand consultancy that never quite found clients. They sent emails, words shaped like accountability without the weight. I did not cut out my heart. I did not unlock the door. Instead, I started something Frank would have liked. I called it the Last Key Fund. We grant tiny, practical things that keep elders in their homes. New railings, shower bars, a month of groceries when a fraud freeze snarls rent money. I told Theo I wanted safeguards. Board oversight, annual review, no single gatekeeper risks. He set it up. Miss Opal became my fiercest volunteer. She can spot a scam call by the way silence breathes on the line before the voice begins. People sent letters. One was from a girl who lived near the library, 17, named Nia Carter. She wanted to be a carpenter. Her mother worked nights. They fixed their own porch with YouTube and a prayer. Nia asked if the fund helped with apprenticeships. We did after that. We bought her a tool belt and paid for her to shadow a woman who runs a Finnish carpentry crew and swears like a sailor only when the tape measure lies. Nia spent a Saturday on my porch installing a railing that could hold the weight of a bad day without complaining. Betrayal emailed once to say she was pregnant. She attached a blurry ultrasound and a sentence. "We want our child to know her family." So did I. But wanting and trust do not come in the same envelope. I wrote back, "When you can say what you did and what you will never do again, we can talk about names and birthdays." Silence answered for 3 months. The podcast episode got shared more than anything the library had ever posted. We hosted a workshop on how to say no and keep Sunday dinner. People laughed and cried. A man in a Braves cap told us he'd apologized to his mother for calling her forgetful when she was just slower at the phone than he liked. A woman told me she mailed her son a copy of her boundary letter with a return receipt request because she wanted to hear the postal carrier say, "He signed." We made a handout with that idea at the top. A bill with language about elder exploitation and home title protection crawled through a state committee. I sat under the Capitol's indifferent chandeliers and read the names of people we'd helped. while a staffer marked lines on a copy and muttered about commas. I went home and watered the basil. The evening smelled like tomatoes and rain. The doorbell rang. Logan stood on my porch with his hands jammed into his pockets, the way he did as a teenager when he'd broken something and didn't know how to tell me which part was still sharp. He didn't ask to come in. He looked at the swing, at the tiny nick Frank never sanded smooth. "Mom," he said finally, "I'm so sorry." There it was, the word that feels thin until you put it on your tongue and let it dissolve. He didn't say, "We were worried." He said, "We were wrong." He talked for a long time, about money, about shame, about how easy it is to let someone else's ambition drive the car when you don't want to look at the road. "I didn't stop her," he said. "That's on me." I told him about the fund, about Nia, about our workshops. I told him I still make too much tea for one person and never quite learned to drink it before it goes cold. We didn't hug. We stood there. Sometimes the body needs to listen for a while before the arms remember. "Brielle wants to talk," he said. "I believe people can change," I said. "I do not assume it." He nodded. He looked at the key hook by my door and smiled with one corner of his mouth. "Keep them," he said. "All of them." "Always," I said. The letter arrived in a plain envelope with too many stamps. It was not perfect. It did not ask for money. It did not contain a spin word like optics. It contained verbs with subjects. I lied. I slapped. I tried to force. I will not do that again. She asked if we could meet at the library and not my home because she wanted to look me in the eye somewhere I am strongest. We met in the genealogy room, where the air smells like old paper and possibility. She brought Clementine, my granddaughter, whose hair curls like a comma at the back of her neck. Brielle took a parenting class. She read a book about apologies. She started a new job where she is the assistant and not the brand, taking notes and fetching coffee without calling it curation. Sometimes she talked too much. Sometimes she was very quiet. She has not asked for my keys again. I took Clementine to the children's corner and we sat on a rug shaped like a sun. "Say bye to Grandma June," Brielle said when they left. I did not think I would ever hear that sentence without flinching. Some days I still do. Other days the word grandma does not hurt at all. We built new habits like steps. The clinics grew. Logan asked if he could help with setup. He made a slide deck that did not look like a hostage tape. He brought folding chairs early, left late, and asked Miss Opal for feedback because he understands now that competence is a practice and humility is a tool. I gave a talk at City Hall about the language of concern. I said, if your "I'm worried about your safety" comes with a deed transfer, you are not worried about safety. You are worried about access. A man in the third row laughed, then cried, then stood in line and cried again when he reached me because he had been the one pushing his mother toward the wrong door. He left with a checklist and a plan to build a ramp that didn't lead to his checking account. We added small practical things to the fund as we learned what people actually need. A secondhand smartphone for a woman whose family told her the internet was scary but kept asking her to wire them money. A fireproof lockbox. Delivered with a small tutorial and 2 cups of tea. A ride to a bank branch where the clerk knows your name because no one should make big decisions on hold music. At one clinic, a quiet man in a denim jacket stood up. My daughter asked for my debit card to help with groceries, he said, and then helped herself to my rent. I didn't want to report my own child. He folded his hands like a prayer. But I'd like to sleep. We got his card frozen and his landlord a certified letter explaining the delay with proof. We walked him to the police station and then to the diner. He said the omelet tasted like oxygen. Miss Opal became a one-woman phone scam deterrent. She recorded a message of herself saying, "Baby, I was born in the same decade as the rotary phone. Try me." We play it at clinics, and the room laughs the laugh of people who have found their tribe. Nia finished her apprenticeship and started a Saturday crew. 3 girls in boots who show up on time and leave a job cleaner than they found it. She installed 10 shower bars for seniors who needed more dignity than a cheap suction cup can offer. She texted me a photo of her first truck. The caption said, "Keys are for building." The law changed in tiny ways that matter to people without lawyers. The Secretary of State's office added an alert you can turn on for title changes, like a smoke detector for your deed. The DMV put a line in their handbook about not pressuring elders to voluntarily add co-owners to vehicle titles. The library added a binder of sample language for hard letters, because sometimes courage needs a template. On Clementine's first birthday, Brielle asked if we could have a small picnic at a public park near the river. Boundaries followed us like well-trained dogs. We brought sandwiches, a blanket, and a cake that looked like a cloud. Brielle made an awkward but honest toast. "I am grateful for another chance," she said. "I am not asking for anything that isn't mine." She looked at me. "Thank you for keeping what is yours." When they left, Logan lingered. He pointed to the stroller and then to the keys in my hand like a man who has learned that symbolism matters. "I'm trying to raise her without shortcuts," he said. I thought shortcuts were clever. They are not. We stood in the sunlight that made everything look briefly like forgiveness. Some days I miss what I never had. Some mornings I set out 2 mugs, then put one back. On those days I take my tea to the porch and read letters. One is from a grandson who apologized to his grandmother for calling her stubborn when she was practicing how to say no in the mirror. He used our template. Another is from a woman who mailed herself a copy of her boundary letter, just so the postmark would witness the day she chose dignity. 2 years is enough time for a fig tree to remember how to give fruit. It is not always enough to fix a family, but we have grown some new wood. The Last Key Fund has built 87 railings, installed 120 shower bars, and funded 9 apprenticeships. We host a quarterly gavel night where we read letters from folks who said no and still got invited to Thanksgiving. We also read letters from people learning to forgive themselves for not saying it sooner. There is always one that begins, "I thought I was being mean." Turns out I was being clear. The porch swing sings a little at dusk. The nails shift like they're telling each other the day's weather. Sometimes I trace the heavy key in my pocket, the old brass one from a house Frank restored for a woman who thought she could never live upstairs again. He built her a railing. He left the key on a nail by her back door. "So you can choose," he told her. "So stairs aren't a threat. They're a promise." People ask if I regret the day at the veranda. Regret is a little like mold. It grows in dark, damp places. We keep the porch bright. If you're listening and someone you love is telling you to hand over your keys, hear me. You are not a car to be driven. You are a home to be respected. Put your documents in order. Make your lists. Say your no out loud, even if your hands shake. You are not being cruel. You are being clear. And if you are the one reaching for someone else's keys, ask yourself what you're really trying to unlock. On Tuesdays, I still volunteer at the library. I straighten picture books and answer questions about printer jams and show people where the bathrooms are. I watch teenagers fling themselves into chairs and laugh with their whole bodies. I hold the door for anyone carrying more than they should. I wave at the security guard who looks bored until he does not. I help a woman print a boarding pass so she can go see her sister who just had surgery in Ohio. I show a man how to scan a document to send to his landlord. I tell a girl with bitten nails that the good books are on the bottom shelf, the ones with spines soft from being loved. I go home and water the basil. I wipe the porch rail clean. I run my fingers along the grain like a blind woman reading a friendly palm. I take my keys off the hook and turn them in my hand the way you turn a new idea. The heaviest one warms in my palm. Keys learn your heat. They remember you. I like to think the lock does too. At night, when the street is quiet and the chimes argue softly with the breeze, I hear my husband in the wood. "Plumb and true," Frank used to say when a frame finally sat the way it always meant to. I think about that phrase when I slide the deadbolt and turn out the porch light. Plumb and true. It sounds like dignity. It sounds like a life that fits its studs. I keep my keys. I keep my porch. I keep my name. I keep my peace. And somehow, in the room that used to be Logan's, painted a gentler blue now with a bookshelf we built for Clementine, there's enough quiet for Hope to sleep without snoring. One afternoon, months after the law passed and the clinics had run on their own steam for a while, a woman I didn't know knocked on my door. She stood on the bottom step, hands clasped. "I'm Paula," she said. "My neighbor said you help people keep their houses." "I don't do miracles," I told her. "I do lists." She laughed, then cried. A list would be a miracle. We sat at my table with tea that cooled too fast and a pen that ran out of ink at the wrong time. We made a plan. Call the bank. Freeze the card. Stop being alone with the person who wants your name on a line you didn't write. She left with copies and a new lock and a ride to the branch. She texted 2 weeks later. I slept. Sleep is the first thing greed takes. It convinces you your yes is the only blanket. It is not. There are other blankets. They just aren't monogrammed with someone else's initials. When Brielle's apology had the legs to walk, she asked for a job reference. Not from me, from her supervisor. It said words like punctual and reliable. It did not say exceptional. It did not have to. She brought Clementine to the library and sat in a circle at Storytime without performing motherhood for anyone's camera. She carried the stroller. She folded it herself. The look she gave me when she asked if Clem could sit with me during the craft was not begging and not entitled. It was the look of a person learning to ask without taking. If you're waiting for the part where everything ties up with a bow you could balance on a cake, I will disappoint you. We do not live in a bakery. We live in houses with pipes that make sounds, with floorboards that pop at night, with porches that need sanding, with families that crack and mend and sometimes learn and sometimes do not. My son brings me groceries on Thursdays and takes my trash can to the curb when the bin feels heavier than the week. My daughter-in-law sends me a text when traffic is bad, so I do not sit by the window and worry about headlights that will never turn into their headlights. My granddaughter says key now and holds up whatever she has in her hand like it unlocks something. I do not correct her. I tell her she's right. Sometimes I sit with the letters we keep in a box labeled with a strip of masking tape and a felt tip marker that bleeds a little. I think it's good when truth leaves a slight stain. There is one from a man in New York who wrote, "I told my mother I loved her after I told her no." There is one from a woman in Arizona who wrote, "I am 75 and learned boundaries last Tuesday." There is one from a nurse in Wisconsin who wrote, "I see this in the hospital every shift. People who hand over more than they should because the word family arrives like a siren." We send a bookmark back to each of them with the sentence, "Kindness is not incompetence." Sometimes we add a note. Turn the key in your own lock tonight, out loud for practice. On a morning that felt like the start of a page, I stood in my kitchen holding a photograph of Frank taken the year he built our porch. He is grinning with a pencil behind his ear, sawdust freckling his forearms. The porch behind him already looks like a place where truth would feel comfortable taking off its shoes. I said his name out loud, the way you do when you need help you can't ask for in any other language. I said, "I kept the keys." The air felt honest. The doorbell rang. It was Nia, holding a level and a bag of screws. "Thought we'd tighten that bottom step," she said. "The wood's fine." The screws are lazy. She knelt and set the level. The bubble steadied. She drove the screw and smiled. "Plumb and true," she said, and I had to sit down for a minute because sometimes hope sneaks in, wearing work boots and a grin you recognize. When evening comes, I pull the key from my pocket and feel the shape of my life in metal that has learned my hand. The door opens and closes because I choose it. The lock turns because I turn it. The porch light stays on for as long as it takes for whoever needs it to find their way home without handing that home to someone else. I do not slam a gavel. I do not bang anything but the screen on my way back inside when the mosquitoes get self-important. I set the keys on their hook, and the sound they make when they land is not a verdict. It is a lullaby. I used to think the opposite of being used was being alone. It isn't. The opposite of being used is being known. The opposite of being used is being respected. The opposite of being used is an ordinary Tuesday where you make eggs and water the basil and teach a teenager to index a family history and walk back to a porch that holds your weight and your secrets and your laughter and your number. If someone ever tells you that a woman your age does not need so much space, look around. Count your books. Count your memories. Count the steps that took you from who you were told to be to who you decided to become. Then hand them a list instead of your keys. Offer them a chair if they can sit without reaching for drawers that aren't theirs. Offer them a sandwich if they can eat without appraising your plates. If they cannot, show them the door. That is not meanness. That is stewardship. People call me strong. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm just stubborn, and the lock is good. Sometimes I cry because forgiveness sits on my porch like a stray cat, and I don't know whether to feed it. On those days, I put out a saucer, then sit with the door closed and the light on and see who shows up. Remorse or manipulation with a bow. I have learned the difference. It took me almost 70 years and one very loud afternoon to learn it. I'm not ashamed of the time. When I die, many years from now, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, there will be a small envelope taped to the inside of the piano bench that no one has played since Frank plunked out Tennessee Waltz badly and with gusto. It will say, "For whoever sits on this bench and thinks about coming for what isn't theirs." Inside will be a list, not money, not titles, not deeds, a list of ways to be a person. The first line will say, "Ask for a key only if you've earned a room. For now, I live. I cook for one and sometimes two. I take the bus when I feel like it because you meet the whole city in a 12-minute ride. I weed the front strip of dirt with my neighbor who believes dandelions are proof of God's sense of humor. I sign my name in blue ink because it makes me happy. I keep a roll of quarters in the drawer for laundry even though the machines take cards now, because a quarter in the palm feels like competence. I tape the pen cap to the cup so it doesn't run away. I label things. I forgive slow. I love loud. I say no when I need to. I keep my keys. And sometimes, on a Sunday that smells like cut grass and a grill, I hear a car door and a small voice. "Grandma June." Clementine runs with her arms out like a bird who knows the ground will hold. Brielle follows at a respectful distance. Logan carries a folding chair because he can't help himself. We sit on the porch, and Clementine climbs into my lap, and I show her how to trace the grain of the railing with a fingertip. "It's like a river," I tell her. "It knows where it's going." She holds my keys, and they clack in her small hand, and she says, "Open." I kiss the top of her head and say, "Yes, baby." "When it's yours?"